Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to need to attach the piece that's going to hold our Christmas lights to the tumbler. So I'm just mixing up 5 milliliters part A and B of fast set epoxy, and I am only going to apply that to the bottom of the tumbler. You want to apply a generous amount here and make sure that the bottom is fully covered. We don't want any dry spots here because we want to make sure that there is a good adhesion between the light piece and the tumbler. We want to make sure that it's really stuck on. Once you have the bottom fully covered in the epoxy, you want to take the plastic piece and the grooves are going to go face down onto the tumbler, and it should be a perfect fit. Once you push it down as much as you can, you also want to make sure that you set something heavy on top so it helps that adhesion. So once you've let your epoxy fully cure, the bottom piece should now be fully attached to the cup, so now we're going to apply our lights. I am going to be using CCDIY UV resin to apply my lights, but you can use super glue or whichever method you prefer. So we're going to start by pulling the light string all the way through. You can, if you choose to, if you don't want to use all of the lights, you can actually cut the rest of your wire off if you don't want to use all of them. I did in my tutorial, so I'm just going to pull it all the way through till I get to the end. So when you get to the end of the wire here, there is a rubber piece. When you pull it through, it is going to be a snug fit. You just want to be careful that you don't tug this too tightly because it will disconnect the wire. So because this rubber piece is a little bit chunkier than the rest, I'm going to first wrap it around the cup and kind of conceal that with the bottom piece. So then I'm going to take a glob of UV resin and then I'm going to stick the light directly on it, and then I'm going to cure that. Now this part you can do at any point in time. I just did it to get it out of the way, so I'm just using these adhesive Velcro dots, and I'm going to stick one end of it to the cup on the bottom and then one other piece of it onto the light. So the light in here is a good fit. We did leave a little extra room, that way you can take this out and place the batteries as needed. So these Velcro dots will help hold the light secure to your tumbler so they don't fall around, but it'll also leave enough room so that the bottom of the tumbler still sits completely flat. So now I'm just going to continue going around the entire tumbler, and then I'm just going to continue to place little dots of UV resin, cure that one at a time, and then just wrap my lights accordingly. You can do this in whatever pattern you like. I just went around the entire cup and I used all of the strands of light, but like I mentioned earlier, if you don't want to use all of the strands and you just want to use a few, you can absolutely cut this wire as short as you'd like. You want to make sure here that you're pulling the strands of lights as tight as you can, but don't overstretch it because we don't want to break any of the wires, but you do want it snug against the cup. That way when we go to apply our glitter and our paint, none of those lights will be moving. Once you've got your lights into the pattern that you'd like and you've cured all of those UV dots, now we're just going to mix up our glitter. So I'm using the 2 glitters provided in your crate. I'm going to do primarily a lot of the lighter glitter and then just add a tiny bit of the darker glitter just to give it that pretty Grinch themed color. So now we're going to apply our base coat. So I am using Jade from Pop Up Color, and I'm just going to apply this directly over the entire tumbler, just directly over the lights. Don't worry about them being covered because we're going to go back through and clean that up afterwards. I did do a thicker coat of paint here, so it doesn't have to be perfect. You're not looking for it to be covered because we're just going to apply our glitter directly over this. So I used a thicker coat of paint here, and I'm just making sure that all of the tumbler is covered, including over the lights as well as over the wire. The only thing that we're not going to paint here is the bottom of the tumbler. Once you've got your cup fully covered in the paint while it's still wet, we're just going to go in with our glitter mix and we're going to dump that over the entire tumbler, making sure we get all of the spots covered. So you may need to do this a couple of times just to make sure that you don't miss any spots or any spots under the wire. So just go through and cover your entire tumbler. Make sure you tap off any of that excess glitter because we don't need that, and then we're going to let that dry. So now what I'm going to go and do is I'm just using these tiny little eyelash brushes that I got from Amazon. You can use a Q-tip or anything similar to that, and I'm going to go over where my lights are and just brush off the paint and the glitter, and this worked really well. I didn't have to use any sort of alcohol or anything. I just went over it with the brush and cleaned that off. So now we're going to go in with our first coat of epoxy. I mixed up 15 milliliters each part A and B of fast set epoxy, and then I'm going to apply that over the entire tumbler. So the way that I did this here is I did not apply epoxy to the bottom of the tumbler. I will show you how I apply the bottom epoxy at a later step. So for right now, you're just going to apply it over the rest of the tumbler except for the bottom. Once you've fully covered your cup, you're just going to let that cure for the 24 hours. Once you've let that cure, we're going to mix up another 10 milliliters each part of A and B fast set epoxy, and then we are going to apply the May mica from Simply Sarah's Customs, which is a beautiful sparkly green. We're going to apply that directly into the epoxy. You can choose however much you want to add. If you add more, it's going to give it a darker color. I added just a little scoop, a little popsicle stick full of the mica, and it gave it enough color for me. So I'm just going to apply my mica pretty heavily over the wired spots just to kind of help hide that wire a little bit more and give this cup more texture and more dimension. So just know that this cup itself is definitely going to be a chunkier cup. There's no real way around that. With the Christmas lights, in order to hide the wires, you do have to apply quite a few coats of epoxy, so that's just something to know ahead of time. Once I've applied my mica where I want it, I'm just going to use the popsicle stick and I'm going to kind of thin it out and spread that mica around. So I'm just going to spread it until I get it to the desired look that I want. You can do this step however you'd like. Once I applied it over the wires, I just kind of spread it out a little further. So now to apply my water slide, I'm just going to soak the water slide in water, and then I'm going to place it on the cup where I want it, and then I'm going to lightly slide the actual water slide off and then pull the backing out from under it. Now, because this cup isn't entirely smooth, when you're applying the water slide, you will see some wrinkles, so you want to make sure that you take a microfiber towel and just smooth any of those wrinkles out, making sure that it is fully pressed on the cup and no water is underneath. So for the bottom of the cup, I'm going to mix up 5 milliliters part A and B of fast set epoxy, and then I'm going to apply our previous glitter mix as well as some of the mica directly into the epoxy, and then I'm going to smooth that over the bottom of the cup. You want to make sure that you get it as even as possible. Now, one thing to keep in mind, because we're not putting this on the turner because we don't want it to leak into the spots of the light, I'm going to leave it sitting face down like this. However, you want to make sure that if it drips, you clean up any of the drips from the side of the cup. So once you've let that bottom piece cure, now we're going to mix up 10 milliliters each part A and B of fast set epoxy, and then we're going to apply that over the entire tumbler. You want to make sure here that you're going over the bottom lip of the tumbler, but you don't want to fully coat the bottom like you normally would. So just get it up to the edge of the tumbler, making sure that you kind of smooth out the edges and that it is a fully flat surface, but do not cover the bottom in this part. And that's all for this tutorial. Once you let that cure, you're ready to go. So we have a removable light pack, so you are able to change the battery if it does die, and then you'll have access to the on and off switch, so you can turn that on and off as you'd like. Thank you so much for subscribing to our craft crate and watching this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed, and I can't wait to see what you create.